In Baltimore, you were either a drape or a square. I was too young to be either, but I was a drape sympathizer, of course. I never knew a drape, except one lived across the street, and I can't say his name because he's not a public figure. But I thought he was quite spectacular. And he had a car exactly like the one Crybaby drives. And he just never even look at me or anything. But I made friends with his brother, so I could, and my parents didn't like the whole family living there or anything. You know, it was like, it was the poor family on the block, basically.
John always had kind of idolized these, you know, these, whatever, these sort of the bad kids or whatever, the drapes, you know, the long hairs and the greasers and stuff. He just always admired them.
The big thing that led me to writing Crybaby in the very beginning was a vague memory of a famous murder in Baltimore in real life, of a drapette. Her name was Carolyn Wells, and she was also known as Peaches. And she was a 14-year-old girl, some people said looked 30, who was strangled to death, and no one ever caught him. And they used to tell you in school, this is what happens to drapette girls, you know, that like hung out with a fast crowd. Because she did, she was like 14, she hung around with boys that stole cars and hook school and everything. And that was a really famous murder.
There was a lot of play in the press about the problem of juvenile delinquency. And this grew out of a whole sensibility in the 1950s that, you know, World War II was over, we were all going to live in suburbia, and everything was going to be perfect, but oh, suddenly we've got these problems, and oh, these kids are, what's happening to these damn kids?
You give us the eye, then we move in.
And then you start yapping about them trying to pick up your girl.
Then I get them outside and we clobber them.
Then I clean them out, and we split 3 ways.
Ha, no chaperone. And I'm probably hopped up on marijuana.
You would have, you know, Sal Mineo playing a juvenile delinquent.
I'm the victim of the greatest social disease of our generation. Parents.
And then you'd have these real live juvenile delinquents out there.
Drapettes hung around on railroad tracks a lot, too. They would meet for parties and then jump out of the way when trains go.
This would be played up to stoke people's fears and ambivalence about, you know, deviations from the norm.
What a sad vision of today's youth. The juvenile authorities have had it with drape gangs. I see that your parents haven't taken the trouble to come to get you.
Oh, yes, we did. You happy now, Mona? Huh? You finally did it. You put your own mother in an iron lung.
Mrs. Malnarowski.
This court places you on probation until you reach the age of 21. On condition, however, that you place yourselves in custody and under the control of the State Youth Authority.
The idea of, you know, no, I'm not a juvenile delinquent, it plays to a degree in Crybaby because he has the look, but he's really a nice guy. As the Shangri-Las would say, he's good, bad, but he's not evil.
And the drapes were cooler, the drapes fought more. But you can look in the Baltimore Sun and you'll see some of the articles that I found writing this movie and how I sold it when I did the pitch at the studios. Drape was in the headlines, that word. They had drape youth today were arrested. It was a word that was used. It was like juvenile delinquent. It was a word in Baltimore that was, parents were really uptight if your kids were drapes. So everybody wanted to be one.
A lot of what I used was my stepfather, you know. He was a guy who grew up as a greaser. I mean, he was full on, you know, greaser in Chicago, you know, in the 40s and 50s. And so he became the kind of primary, you know, sort of basic model for Crybaby for me. And, you know, that combined with, you know, certainly Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent, and young Elvis.
You're the future now, boy. You're the only future for this God-forsaken family.
There were certain neighbors that were 100% square.
We're squares, Allison. And squares gotta stick together.
Yeah, but drapes are people too. They just look different.
I mean, there were cool rich people that were drapes, but it was hard to be a convincing drape if you were rich.
No, she's a scrape. Part square, part drape.
I think she's pretty.
And my parents would take us bowling, but then they realized it was a drape hangout. And I remember there were drapes all hanging around the jukebox, and I was like, oh my want to be a drape so much. And I remember this one just played the song The Joker, which I've tried to put in every movie. I still haven't put it in it, and he would play it over and over. He played the whole song for 8 hours over and over and over. And they always wore their collar up. That was the thing, you know. They always had their collar up. And I just thought they looked great, you know. You know, when you pitch a movie, you have to go in and I show them show and tell a lot, right? So with this, I wanted to show them what drapes look like. But the only really great drape pictures I have were in a very famous book of gay 50s photographer by Mr. Miser, who discovered Joe D'Alessandro. And this is the book, but I couldn't show him this. You know, it's a studio, my first studio film. They think, oh great, you're gonna make a movie about naked boy juvenile delinquents. So I showed him the pictures in here that weren't naked. You know, this is very much Iggy Pop's entrance shot in Cry Baby, sitting there in the bucket taking a bath. It's the exact shot, and it's totally where I got it from. Here they are, here are drapes playing cards. They love to shoot dice too. That was another thing drapes did. And of course, fixed motorcycles and hot rods. And here's another one. Drapes. You see, so I would show all these pictures, but I had copies made because I couldn't on the next page is like, you know, somebody, this, you know, basically. So I didn't think it would be the best way to get the job. But I thank Mr. Miser for this book and my inspiration for Cry Baby.
I don't think that there was a particular film that gave birth to all of this. This was sort of a gradual process. The Dead End Kids, of course, and then later on to other kinds of films like City Across the River with the young Tony Curtis.
What are you doing all suited up?
Certainly the Wild One with Marlon Brando. He was a drape, which was a juvenile delinquent. But Elvis was more of a drape, more like the rockabilly movies. Tommy Sands was a drape. Billy Lee Riley, that kind of stuff. You know, Sun Records that we only know about now, that was all drapes.
The term juvenile delinquent reared up out of pop psychology and became wedded to rock and roll to the degree that Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers cut a number called No, I'm Not a Juvenile Delinquent, which John Waters used in Pink Flamingos to great effect. When Amy Locane in Cry Baby says, I'm tired of being good, she's speaking the line that Sandra Dee was always on the verge of saying.
So is she.
Oh, you don't have to be. You haven't done anything.
But she's right. She's right. I want it.
Sandra Dee was a good girl, but she was a complicated good girl because obviously she had sexual desires and she knew sex was out there. She didn't quite know what to do with it, but it was there. It was unavoidable. Amy Van Doren, at her baddest.
When I want something, I want it now. Take me out there. Come on, Ralph.
Still on the prowl, huh? Take it easy, boy.
So in some ways, these films, I often think, got through to certain audiences at the time, maybe even more than the better-known ones. They are the mulch out of which John Waters has confected Cry Baby.
Well, certainly I wanted to look like a 50s movie. I wanted to look like The Girl Can't Help It. I mean, that kind of technicolor, bright kind of colors, like an Elvis movie. I mean, especially the scenes like when Allison is singing and also when Cry Baby's singing Teardrops Are Falling, when the whole bed moves in on a dolly. They used to do that a lot in like 50s and 60s musicals. And it's a very subtle thing. You don't even really realize when you're watching. You think, well, what's that mean? But I think Dave did a good job with that in there.
I was a big admirer of John's films. I always thought, you know, he was such a so sort of outside the system and such a kind of a great radical, you know, filmmaker. And so yeah, I was very intrigued and excited. And then when I read the thing, it was like, this is, you know, perfect.
It isn't that edgy a movie, although the ingenue girl drinks a bucket of tears in it. I mean, there certainly are the gratuitous John Waters shots. This was the only time ever that every studio wanted to make my next movie. Hairspray had come out. It was a success to steam. Everybody thought it was a bigger hit than it was. But every studio, Dawn Steele, remember her? She was sending me leather coats, you know, because I'd show the drape pictures. They all wanted, there was a bidding war. That has never happened to me before or after.
There was a huge difference going from Hairspray to Cry Baby because I think we spent about $2.5 million all told, maybe less on Hairspray, and the budget on Crybaby was about $12 million. So you're really talking about a huge step. And the pressures, and suddenly you're working for a studio rather than New Line, who wasn't a studio then. And the expectations were completely different.
Crybaby felt like we finally had money for the first time. It was a bigger crew. There were people who weren't just family members working on the crew. Up to that, we did Hairspray, which of course was a lower budget film, but we were all working for Imagine now, and I think that it felt like there was a little bit of legitimacy behind this compared to John's other works.
See, I actually came in on Pink Flamingos. I knew that the films were being made and stuff, but because David Lockley collaborated with me on one. But the actual work that I did started in Pink Flamingos.
Well, that's when it became really, I don't know, I mean, how much more of a real movie, but I mean, we actually,
well, it was
everybody.
first color.
It was in color, that was it. That was the transition, was color and sound, that was it.
The other, Multiple Maniacs, was black and white, and the sound was kind of dubbed in later or added to it.
Right.
You know, so
they were art films, Vincent.
Yeah, so that's
Multiple Maniacs.
Well, we were all artists at the time.
Right.
On Crybaby, John's favorite expression for me, or to me, was, what fresh hell is this? Which was basically because something was going wrong every single minute of every single day. Whether it was that it rained nonstop for the entire show, or that cast members weren't available.
Well, you better get smart, kids, because you just don't go to the guy who writes you a check and say, oh, gee, it rained today, we couldn't film. Well, you know what? We're going to film.
John always thinks all this stuff out ahead of time. It's not ad lib. It's creative, and we're allowed to enhance. And John doesn't always have it pictured in his head what it's going to look like, but he definitely knows what he wants.
I remember not liking that particular night. It was a night shoot, and they were just like, John was like, okay, now we're gonna have you in the middle of the sign being thrown in the air. I just didn't like that. That was the only thing I didn't like, though.
A lot of people associate John's look with B movies, which it does. My background actually was high fashion. I started at Women's Wear Daily. And that's where, believe it or not, a lot of the inspiration came from. They could come from Saint Laurent, but I would then just alter them severely. They just became outrageous. Some of the gowns and stuff towards the end. I mean, people really didn't dress like that, you know. They did in some of the movies, but I took a great deal of license towards the end.
We had a hard time making the movie. It rained every single day. It was, a lot of stuff went against the movie. It was a really hard movie to make because it was really big. It was really, for me at the time, like this giant crew and all the special effects and rain machines, and which just made it a nightmare. The trailers would be stuck in mud. It was back to Pink Flamingos, the trailers being stuck in the mud. Only these were now the dressing rooms, not the main set for the movie.
I Wanda, honey.
You were on the radio. Would you just get me the out of here?
We had to get a PG-13. That was in my contract. And that was a nightmare.
The MPA, who was all over John, always came down and said, you're only allowed in an R-rated film to have one fuck. So here we are, and the whole joke is repeating the, fuck 3 times.
What's mean, Hector?
Oh, Meg, it's just a teen nonsense word Wanda uses to make herself feel all grown up.
Your Honor, could we take Wanda the fuck home?
You can say fuck once, oh fuck. No, you can say oh fuck twice. You can never say I wanna fuck once. And you can't say oh fuck 3 times. So there is a joke in it where you have to say it 3 times, where Patty Hearst and David Nelson say it like what's fuck mean? Oh, fuck's, it's so ridiculous. So we had to put in beeps, which was the first time they ever did that. And hopefully we're taking them L on this director's cut. We'll see.
The cast of John Waters' Crybaby was like a camp of juvenile delinquents. It really was.
I think in the old days he just had his group of actors, and I think this was one of the first films where he was casting properly.
We did a lot of read-throughs, a lot of rehearsals at his house before we started shooting. It was such a great period, such a great time, you know. I mean, because for me, I had been, although, you know, Jump Street and all that was a great opportunity for me, and it kind of did put me on the map to some degree, but it put me on the map in a place that I wasn't necessarily ready to land, you know.
One of the big reasons why I decided to do Crybaby, aside from the fact that, you know, John is you know, one of my heroes in film. I mean, he's like anybody that William Burroughs would call the Pope of Trash. I mean,
Right,
it's pretty great.
right.
But I'm a big fan of John, so it was great to be able to do that. But also, even more importantly, it was a chance to really make fun of the image that had been shoved down America's throats by the company that I work for. And
so Crybaby for me, I mean, it was really the first time out of the gate for me where I was able to say, all right, fuck it, this is what I want to do. This is the direction I'm going to go in. It was the first one. And it was because of John and his sort of bravery, I mean, in casting me in the film in Crybaby, that Edward Scissorhands came along, and it was because of Crybaby and John that I think Tim maybe had a little bit more interest in me as an actor.
I just wanted to work with John. I just wanted to make, you know, another movie with him and be in Baltimore. I mean, so much of, you know, the fun is the environment and the people you're with, and he uses the same people on the crew all the time, and you know, these are people that I've known now. I've known them for 15 years. Hairspray is 15 years ago, so it's like sort of going home, and that's what I always look forward to.
What a cast we had then. I mean, all in one place. It was wild, those two. That was the wildest movie I've ever made for partying, because think about it. Johnny Depp, Tracy Lords, Susan Terrell, hardly a shrinking violet. Iggy Pop, totally sober, completely clean. With Susan Terrell, the exact, you know, Susan was a drinker, she'd be the first to tell you. Ricky Lake, Patricia Hearst, David Nelson.
That was the guy, of all the people that we've ever met, that was the really impressive guy to me.
To this day, maybe I'm the most impressed that David Nelson made a movie with me, because I grew up with Ozzie and Harriet, and I just would look over and see David Nelson sitting there having lunch with Patty Hearst. And I was thinking, how did this happen? What a wonderful life.
If you have no money to make a film, you need to get some attention, as he did in Pink Flamingos, because that hadn't been done before. So then, as it became more conscious, it really was a conscious effort to be able to have people, to get a buzz created within people that were interested in films, to say, what in the world would David Nelson be doing in a film with Patty Hearst? Now, Tracy Lords is doing a film?
You mean you swapped me for a milkmaid?
With Polly Bergen?
Your Honor, I am Allison's grandmother.
Pepper, you already know.
Working with John is probably the best experience I've ever had. I mean, I started with Hairspray, and it's the same all over again.
Come on in. Today is a special day for me and your grandmother. We've been together 10 whole years.
That's my little snare drum. I was single. I was flirting with, I remember everybody on that show. I actually dated one of the cast members in the movie, and I had a great time. Johnny Depp was amazing. I played his sister in the movie, and he treated me very much like a little sister to him. It was really just, you know, every experience with John Waters kind of exceeds the expectation. And Hairspray, coming from making Hairspray with him, you know, it's like I had pretty high expectations, and Crybaby was just as much fun. And it feels like a summer vacation. It doesn't feel like a job.
John was in town for a little bit. I'd run into a mutual friend of ours who said, oh, yeah, my friend's doing this picture. You have to go talk to him about it. And so, of course, you know, his people talked to my people and all that. And Easter Sunday, I think it was an Easter Sunday, I went in and met with him and auditioned, and he gave me the job.
I had just randomly sent my picture to 6 casting directors that week,
And it was really, I sent it to Paula Harold, who was casting it for a film called Reversal of Fortune, which I had no idea what that was about. And I guess I had a reversal of fortune because they called me in for Crybaby.
There's nothing the matter with my face. I got character.
My brother Michael, in I guess the early 80s, was working in, I used to spend my summers in Provincetown, Mass, was working at a restaurant that Mink Stoll was the hostess at. And she wanted him to audition for Polyester. And my mother forbade it. And so I had this, you know, idea of John as being this madman.
I'm man enough, you big crybaby.
Of course, I was incredibly thrilled to have Iggy Pop in this movie. He had done a few things, but this was first kind of big part.
Iggy, who had been one of my heroes, I mean, growing up, you know, and as a young kid musician, and Iggy being Iggy, you know, Iggy being the sort of one of the inventors of punk rock, you know, maybe the original punk. So he was a great hero to me. When John told me that Iggy was going to play Uncle Belvedere, I was so excited.
And he was very serious about it in a great way. He came, he was really a hard worker. He was never complained about anything. Iggy's a complete gentleman.
You caught me in my birthday suit. Butt naked.
Yeah, he was like definitely like the wacky uncle, and but he's so sweet. He was just sweet and warm and funny, and a good actor. I mean, I was really impressed with his acting skills.
But I remember he came to the set and we cut his hair off because, you know, he had punky hair and everything. So he had to have a drape haircut. So I still have this. This is his headshot for the role, which everybody had, you know, for the cast pack and have a look at everybody. And this is part of his hair that we cut off that day. So it's magic, you see, Iggy Pop's hair.
When I very first got the part, we went to Baltimore and there was a rehearsal at John's house. And the whole cast was there, including John. And I was the only one who brought my mother, because my mother was there on set with me. So it just seemed normal that she would go. So she went to the rehearsal, and I think it had been raining, and she brought her umbrella. And it's just this kind of like silly thing where my mother would always bring her umbrella into the city with me when I was 12 years old, when I used to do commercials, whether it was raining or not. So this way she could like beat off the you know, perverted old businessmen who were always looking at me or something. So we go to the rehearsal, and I think it was actually raining, and that's why she brought her umbrella. But I just remember looking at the umbrella and then having to get on the floor and kiss and roll around with Johnny Depp. And doing this all in front of your mother was a very odd experience.
Kiss me hard.
I've never given a French kiss before.
Watch, it's easy. You just open your mouth, and I open mine. We wiggle our tongues together. And it feels real sexy.
I was 17, so I had some kissing experience, but not tons. And Johnny Depp pretty much taught me how to kiss. He was a really good teacher.
The only thing that looked really experienced was when Iggy and Susan did their French kiss scene. That looked like they had done that before. I'll get you, yeah. But actually, you know something interesting about that number is all those extras, we didn't tell any of them that they had to do that until right before the director yelled action. And we paired them up really quickly and said, okay, you got a French kiss. A lot of tongue, a lot of tongue. Right now, Jerry, the day said, when you're mine.
My partner in that, Darren Burroughs, was a very giving performer, and you know, it was fun to kiss him.
Kim McGuire is like one of the most beautiful spirits on this planet. She's wonderful.
I was so young and I wanted to do well so badly. It was like I was just out to prove something. And I loved the character of Wanda Woodward, but I have to tell you, I was petrified that I couldn't pull it off.
You know, Tracy Lords always gets blamed. And for at 14 being this brilliant person that somehow or another could orchestrate this big porn industry. Well, nobody ever talks about the 39-year-old pigs that were at the top of it all. So we figured we aren't pigs. We're not out to exploit her in that kind of way. Look, we're outlaws. I mean, nobody's really writing a lot of great stuff in film books at this time about John.
I didn't know much about John Waters, and I was pretty freaked out when I found out certain tidbits about John Waters before the audition. My boyfriend at the time was teasing me that he was famous for a turd movie that he had done. And I wasn't really sure what to make of all of that. So I searched the video store for the movie. And having certain movies in my past that I would rather not be reminded of, I never brought up, this movie to Mr. Waters.
The people were still approached him probably as cautiously as they approached her. So we read her. She was anxious to read. She was prepared.
I was so nervous that I was physically nauseous and ended up in the bathroom completely tossing my Cheerios that morning.
Now, the day the FBI showed up on the set, and John and I said, okay, where do we hide her?
The feds came to arrest Tracy Lords to make her be a witness in something she didn't want to do, and it was in the woods, and she was mortified.
These people or whoever they were trying to serve Tracy, they were trying to get on the set, and they were trying, and I remember being pretty vicious on her. It was pretty tough on Tracy. And she's a tough kid, she's a brave girl. So I remember it being very tough on her, and Pat said something to her like, "Oh, come on, honey, we've all been, we've all been arrested. We've all gone to jail. It's no big deal."
If you had been arrested, you were cool. And you got to be part of their, I think they called it the Crime Mary group.
I've been arrested a couple of times. The first time was in 1986.
Well, that's something John always asks the minute you're hired. So, have you been arrested? So, tell us the story.
I was in LA driving in a car that was mine, but I had lent to someone for quite some time. And I got pulled over by the cops. And I was like, what? And they went, oh, your registration. No, actually, they didn't tell me what it was. They just took me out of the car and they jacked me up on the wall.
What was it for? Assault, I think. I got in a fight once. I got in a fight in Vancouver.
Yes, I was arrested in 1994 for protesting and speaking for animal rights. Sort of, it's a story that most people know about. I went to jail for 25 hours.
I didn't do time. I just, was in the pokey for a few hours too many, more than I wanted to be.
We stickered Karl Lagerfeld's offices with, fur is dead. We handcuffed ourselves, all the people that I was with. Overall, it was a positive experience, even though I wouldn't do it again. I'm a mother now. I certainly believed in what I was, standing up for. I mean, I've definitely believed wholeheartedly in the cause, and, I still would protest, fur and all that stuff, but I would do it, legally.
I don't understand why you would want to be part of a group called Crime Mary. I think that was the way I dealt with the fact that I wasn't allowed in that group because I hadn't been arrested.
Amy Locane, who was rather young, went up to Patty Hearst and said, have you ever been arrested? She said, why, yes, I have been. And they said, well, Pat's never been arrested. And John said, oh, yes, she has, for murder.
And then all of a sudden, my mother comes out of the blue, Pat Moran, and says, I was arrested, and we were said for what? She said murder. And we're like, what? And she told the story of when she was arrested with Divine and held for murder. And I thought that was pretty impressive.
That's how it started. Patricia Hearst was comforting her. I was comforting her. We've all been in jail. It's okay. So it was a bonding experience.
It was all designed to make Tracy feel better. And she did. Every person on that set had been arrested. One of them was for white slavery. I mean, it was not traffic violations.
Here were all these people, and people that you would never expect, standing up and said, well, I was arrested for Grand Theft Auto, and I was arrested for kidnapping. That's a long story. And, they just started telling these stories, but it was beyond that. It was the fact that so many people rallied around me and were willing to just kind of stand up and say, you know what, it's not just you.
know, everybody thinks Hairspray was my musical. It's because it's a big Broadway musical now. That was my dance movie. This was my musical, and there is talk now of this being a Broadway musical. I'm in the opening stages of that happening now. And this one's about class, where Hairspray was about outsiders, but this one's definitely about class. The music, every movie I write, I have music in it. As I write, I have the music. My new one, I have the whole soundtrack ever. When you get the script to read it to see if you want to be in it, I have the soundtrack already done. Not the score, but I've written what the score will be and how it'll be, but all the found vintage songs and everything.
John writes completely to music, and Hairspray was a classic example, and Crybaby, he knows exactly what music he wants, and he knows how he wants it. And then we were in the situation for the first time where he was doing original songs. And that's a huge amount of production, and of course we didn't have the amount of time you would have now where you would pre-record months and months in advance. So we did have a lot. That's the one case where we had a lot of help from Imagine. They put a very, very strong music supervisor team on with us.
We did a lot of work for Imagine Entertainment. We did most of their movies as music supervisors. And Imagine picked this property up with John Waters, and we were Imagine's go-to folks at that point in time.
And it was John's first studio picture, so they knew that they needed really pros in there because it was going to be a musical, and they intended it to be musical, and so they wanted people who had experience, and they weren't going to really let it just be kind of one of John's kind of crew members that he assembles in Baltimore on his other movies.
John was always, as a teenager, a music fanatic, and he has a guide that he works with, and he researches a lot of things of the periods when he does a period picture.
I work with a guy named Larry that I've worked with forever in Baltimore in all my movies, and he makes me millions of tapes, and he's credited on it. And Channing Wilroy also, who was a drape. Well, he was probably a square, but he knew that period. He's a little older than me, so he knew all that period really well.
It was absolutely brilliant. He had this like about 2 or 3 cassettes that were with it, with the script when it was given to us, and they were just an assembly of about 50 to 60 phenomenal songs from the period that he had amassed with these 3 DJ buddies of his down there, real legitimate, great, totally authentic to the period.
And regional music. It was regional.
It was so good. I mean, it was such a great tape. And it was it was exactly in the order that he, started out with the song Cry Baby, and on and on.
I knew about Elvis, and I knew about Pat Boone and that kind of stuff, but what I didn't realize is that even Elvis had stolen half the songs from rhythm and blues singers.
John Waters had, I didn't know him or anything, but I'd seen Hairspray, and I'd seen a couple of the other movies, and especially in Hairspray, his knowledge of rhythm and blues was so right on target. I was brought in specifically to do the sort of rockabilly, or, early R&B kind of thing, and they flew me out to New York, and the legendary rhythm and blues songwriter Doc Pomus and I wrote a couple of songs, and I think we wrote like 3, and 2 were used. King Cry Baby and High School Hellcats.
Now, Johnny Depp doesn't sing in this. He can sing. He made tapes and everything, but I think we decided to go with this other voice to be consistent through the whole thing.
I was pretty proud of King Cry Baby, the song. I thought it was a great vocal performance by James Enfield. The musicians were all good. And
we had a lip sync coach. Can you imagine, is there anybody when you're young and say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a lip sync coach. But he was good, and you can see, I think the lip sync is pretty good in it. And it's hard to. You have to be a half a second ahead, really, for it to work. And he taught, they had lip sync lessons.
All the lip sync and all that stuff, and even sort of syncing, your fingers to the chords and stuff, all that stuff came relatively easy just because my background is in music, so yeah, that stuff came pretty easy to me.
And Ed Coupe, who was a guy that we brought in, who was a pal of ours, who was a drama coach, coaches a lot of well-known actors. His job was to teach the actors how to sort of emote in their singing so that it didn't look like lip sync, it really looked like a real performance.
You couldn't open up your mouth too much because you didn't want to overemphasize the fact that you're singing.
Basically what we learned is that when you lip sync, you actually have to sing, so the muscles in your throat are working.
It was a choreographed piece, so it wasn't just, oh, now you're going to do the Madison. It was like, now we're going to go do this Elvis sequence in the license plate factory. So we needed a real choreographer.
And John called me and did sort of an on-the-phone interview and asked me if I smoked cigarettes, was ever in jail, or could choreograph white people. And I said, yeah, to all three. And I thought like I probably wouldn't get the job, but then I got the job.
I mean, look, we've done everything on these sets, but being a choreographer wasn't one of them. So, and also you had somebody with 2 left feet like Johnny, who was very self-conscious of it, that you'd never know in the film.
But I'm guilty till I'm 21. I guess I'm doing time for being young.
I mean, he does a great job.
I just, I just don't dance, I don't get it. It's not my thing, So, John, of course, was like, oh, don't worry, you'll be fine, don't worry.
And you had a lot of white kids on here. I mean, they weren't notoriously great dancers, and some of these dances were complicated.
Originally, I think there were like 13 or 14 production numbers planned for the film. I don't know, I think only 9 got in there.
I mean, those kids that are dancing in the prison scene, they were just kids. They had no dancing experience. Nobody did them.
I never danced before. I can't dance. Even when I was a kid, go to me and my friends would sort of sneak into the dances and stuff, and I never danced. I could never do it.
Like with Johnny Depp's big number in the jailhouse, he had to fall into some boxes, a hose had to go off with a bunch of water in. There was a lot of things going on, We did do it as a master several times, and I think that's why we got it so fast.
It was just a nightmare. It was a nightmare. I mean, horribly, horribly frightened.
There were many scenes in Cry Baby that I really regretted that they were cut. I don't know if it was all for the good of the film. I think some of it was just personal opinion of LA producers of what they thought was right for the movie. I personally thought that some very important things were cut that were really the essence of what John does, which is takes 2 straight people and gives them a journey through all the weirdos in town. And Tojo was one of the weirdos.
Now, I am warning you, it's titty time, and you are getting on my heterosexual nerves.
For Tracy Lords, we made a huge champagne glass that she shot, and of course that was a big thing right there. And we would look in books and old magazines, art magazines and stuff, and it would be the guy on the telephone pole with just his work belt on, and I had a lot of fun just doing one little vignette after another. A woman in Hawaii, and it really saddened me when that was cut out.
There's actually a version of the show that they have on television. They've edited out all the R-rated footage, and they actually inserted, I think, scenes that were deleted from the original movie. There's a whole dance scene at the Turkey Roost or Turkey Point, a whole dance sequence to Pistol Packin' Mama, which I've seen on TV, which is not on the regular video.
Well, there's 2 versions on TV. One I really hate. I approved it because I had to in my contract. However, they took out all the stuff with the parents because I thought it was sacrilegious, or I thought it was stuff, and then the movie was 75 minutes long. So they just put in whole lifts of scenes that we had cut out to pad it out, that if I was going to put that scene, I would have at least cut the musical number down a little. It was the first, assemblage of it. And they didn't cut any of it down to make it long enough. So I really hate that. I've only seen that version once. I can't look at it.
John actually said to me the other day, you won't remember, you'd be shocked at all the things we shot that we took out. And I don't remember, it wasn't like we were tooth and nail over specific scenes that I can remember. I mean, I think they didn't particularly like Tracy Lords, and they were frightened of her in some ways for the sort of obvious reasons of her reputation at that point. So I think there was a bit of pressure to pull back on her story.
There was, at one time in Baltimore, in the early days of television, a very pathetic amateur kids show. I mean, not like you see this American Idol and this snazzy business now. These were just kids. They were drum majorettes, there were accordion players, and there were these kids that were contortionists or whatever they were. He remembered watching that as a child, and he knew that there was a thing called the human wheel. And so that was a thing where a kid, whoever the contortionist was, could roll down the sidewalk kind of like a wheel. So he says, okay, I want this little Ruth, and I want her to be a contortionist. I want her to be a human wheel. I think, oh, okay. Since I didn't even know any kids, my associate, John Strawbridge, and myself, we started researching, and we started like calling kids groups and this and that and the other thing. And this one group said, well, oh yeah, we have a little girl and she can do it. So we, John and myself, John Waters and myself, all of a sudden, we'd see what? This little girl comes, she does the human wheel. Oh my God, this is perfect. Now, we all know that little Ruth was cut out of this film. However, when we did the premiere, no one had bothered to tell little Ruth. Little Ruth showed up in a tiara and a little hair hopper evening gown with her parents. And guess what? No little Ruth. And we felt terrible. It just was one of those things that had escaped you. Here she had been rolling around on the set all day long like a human wheel. We loved it, and for some reason, somebody said little Ruth has to go. But nobody told little Ruth. And so, I don't know whatever became of little Ruth.
I'm gonna sing tonight, and I thought you might like to hear me.
Ah! Whoa! Mind your manners!
This is what we think of your kind of music.
How dare you hit him? You don't own me, Baldwin. I have the right to hear Crybaby sing.
Don't get all worked up, honey. The punk got what he deserved.
Johnny and I sort of had this thing going.
You're a big man, Crybaby, but you're lower than your dead father. And guess who pulled the switch on that jerk? My grandpappy, that's who.
And I had a speech where I tell him that my grandfather killed his father, and in the electric chair, and he used to spit on the ground. He actually spit on me.
As I remember it. Now, you know, when you ask several people about a fight, everybody's gonna have their own interpretation. Well, I just remember we were doing this number, this chicken fight number. At that time, it was towards, everybody's really tired that day, but anyway, Stephen Mailer, I think they had to be on top of each other's shoulders. We were doing a real, you know, chicken fight.
It was this really elaborate number where we get on each other's shoulders, and it's no longer the theatrical version of the film.
I just remember the director was shooting a master. The director, there was a lot of extras around the stage. The director was way back there with the camera, and he yelled cut when the two of them were going into their little fighting things. They were supposed to fight during the musical number and in the scene, and they didn't stop fighting. And I sensed like it was a little more than acting at that point, and I was like, you guys, hey.
I think Johnny pushed us at one point. And we had this whole thing in the end, we dropped our pants, and we spilled wiffle on our boxers. It was like, I had WH, the next guy had, you know, IF, and so on. And we did it right in their face. And I think Johnny kicked me in the ass, actually. And we almost went at it. It was a real war. And then John Waters jumped in the middle and stopped it. And that's about as ugly as it got.
Until one night's caught me right, and now I'm on the run. Oh, lay that pistol down, babe, lay that pistol down.
It's just a fun movie. It's one of those movies you can watch over and over again, and you're always going to find something cool to see. It's like our own rockabilly musical.
I had a critic once that said I beat the critics to the typewriter by calling them a trash epic. But in a way, it's true. If the one thing they can use against you, exaggerate that and embrace it, and they're powerless. My hardcore fans, you know, the ones, they just want Crybaby to eat dog shit. And he's never going to.
High school Hellcat. Come on, a big fight. Wish you would. Love being bad, 'cause just be a schoolgirl.
Come to this theater as a kid. I mean, it's part of growing up. It's a perfect place to have a world premiere, and I'm glad that they're having a real one because they don't do this a lot anymore.
I'm excited. My parents here from New Orleans, and my two friends from New York are here.
That's great.
I'm excited. Yeah.
So, you look wonderful.
Thank you.
How you doing? How you been? You look terrific. Thanks. Good to see you. Stephen Mailer, what do you think about all this, huh? You psyched?
I'm having a great time. What can I say?
What about you, Darren? You excited?
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love you, Kenny.
Don't believe a word they say about me. All vicious rumors. It was amazing to see myself on the screen with people like Mink Stoll and Polly Bergen and Troy Donahue. And
I remember going to the premiere in Baltimore with my whole family. My whole family came, and I remember it being incredibly exciting, and a lot of people liked the movie.
You know, I was in a limo with my husband, Brooke, and I remember getting out of the limo and Pat was right there and locking eyes with her and feeling like I really belonged someplace.
For the first time in quite a while, I felt free, when I went there, when I went to Baltimore, and really felt like I had been accepted into that family,
Look, we were always going to make movies. And John's the bus driver, so we were on the bus, whatever he was going to do.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, let's make a conscious decision in this film. It wasn't any of that. It was just basically, this is my next idea. I want you to design it. I want you to put the people in it. I want you to dress them. Is that all this time has passed, and we're it, pretty much, left. John
We're
and the
the
three of us.
survivors.
We're the dinosaurs, as they say. But I know what he's thinking, and he knows what he's thinking, and I know what you're thinking. So it's like mental telepathy. But at this point in our game of cinema, of making movies, or whatever it is that we've done, that we started out as kids and now all of a sudden we're like geezers or something.
Yeah.
But we still know what the other ones are thinking. So that, believe me, that takes so much bullshit out of the process of making a movie that it's unbelievable.
It's doing a movie in shorthand.
It is. It's doing a movie in shorthand. Exactly.